Hello guys, welcome to Infinite Stories. Please leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories. Let's get into the story. Bella was thrilled to introduce her stepsister, Rachel, to her boss and boyfriend, Michael. The office buzzed with the usual energy, but Bella's confident stride demanded attention. Dressed in a crisp blazer and heels, she exuded authority. Beside her, Rachel, in a simple floral dress and worn flats, seemed like a shadow. Michael rose from his desk, his dark eyes warm but perceptive. His firm handshake met Bella's first, but his gaze softened when it landed on Rachel. Her timid smile was shy, yet sincere. Bella was too busy flaunting her role as his girlfriend to notice Michael's lingering glance. In her mind, Rachel was just a dull accessory, a mere formality in Bella's grand narrative of success. Rachel felt a mixture of awe and discomfort. The sleek glass walls and the hum of productivity seemed a world away from her reality. She'd always been treated as the outsider in Bella's home, a burden to be tolerated. Michael's politeness surprised her. He asked about her interests, his voice patient and genuine. Rachel answered cautiously, feeling Bella's sharp eyes on her. When the meeting ended, Bella ushered her out quickly. As they left, Michael's mind buzzed with curiosity. Rachel's quiet grace left an impression that he couldn't shake off. At home, Rachel's life returned to its painful routine. The moment she stepped through the door, Bella's cheerful facade slipped away like a discarded mask. Christiana, Bella's mother, sat on the couch, her eyes narrowing as she took in Rachel's presence. "Back already?" Christiana's tone was dismissive. Bella tossed her purse onto the table and turned to Rachel with a sneer. "Don't think you impressed anyone today," she hissed. "You're lucky I let you tag along." Rachel bowed her head, swallowing the sting of the words. The air was thick with resentment, and the walls of the house seemed to close in tighter each day. As the evening wore on, Rachel's chores multiplied. Scrubbing dishes, sweeping floors, nothing she did was ever enough. Bella and Christiana lounged in the living room, exchanging gossip and laughter while Rachel's hands ached with work. She could hear Bella bragging about Michael, about how he adored her and how their future was set in stone. Rachel bit her lip, forcing back tears. She wanted to believe there was more to life than this endless cycle of servitude. In the darkness of her small room that night, Rachel whispered a prayer for change, unaware that the first seeds of transformation had already been planted. Michael couldn't stop thinking about Rachel. Her quiet strength intrigued him, a stark contrast to Bella's often overwhelming presence. As he sipped his morning coffee in his sleek office, he replayed their brief conversation in his mind. There was something genuine in Rachel's eyes, a vulnerability that made him want to protect her. His thoughts were interrupted by Bella's arrival. She swept into the room, her perfume clouding the air. "Good morning, darling," she cooed, leaning over his desk. Michael smiled, but it felt forced. The spark that once ignited between them was beginning to fizzle out. He wondered if Bella noticed, or if she was too absorbed in her own world to care. Meanwhile, Bella was on cloud nine. In her mind, everything was going according to plan. She had Michael wrapped around her finger, and the introduction of Rachel was just another way to flood her life. As she chatted about her upcoming plans for the weekend, she didn't notice Michael's distracted gaze. He was nodding, but his mind was elsewhere. The image of Rachel's timid smile kept intruding. Bella's voice became background noise, drowned by an inexplicable urge to know Rachel better. A shift was happening, subtle but inevitable, like a breeze that hints at a coming storm. Rachel's days blurred into a monotonous rhythm of chores and whispered insults. Christiana's disdain was constant, a needle that pricked her self-worth with precision. "Why can't you be more like Bella?" she'd sneer. Bella basked in her mother's praise, her eyes glinting with satisfaction. Each jab at Rachel was a victory, a way to cement her superiority. But beneath her smug exterior, Bella harbored a gnawing fear, a fear that her control was fragile. She pushed Rachel harder, as if trying to bury her under the weight of expectations and criticism. Rachael, however, bore it silently, her spirit bruised but not broken. One evening, as Rachael scrubbed the kitchen floor, Michael's sleek car pulled into the driveway. Bella's excitement was palpable. "Behave yourself," she snapped at Rachael, her eyes cold. Christiana plastered on a sugary smile as Michael entered. The house seemed to brighten in his presence, though he quickly noticed the tension beneath the surface. His gaze flicked to Rachael, who knelt on the floor, her hands raw from scrubbing. Their eyes met briefly, and he saw a flicker of pain. Something inside him tightened. The disparity between Rachael's struggle and Bella's obliviousness became starkly clear. He smiled politely, but his heart was heavy with unease. Michael settled onto the couch, making polite conversation with Bella and Christiana. Their laughter felt hollow to him now, an echo of something false. As Bella chattered about her latest shopping spree, his eyes wandered to Rachael, who stood quietly in the doorway. Her hands were clasped together, her shoulders hunched slightly, as if bracing for an invisible blow. He couldn't understand how someone so gentle could be treated with such indifference. The contrast between her humility and Bella's arrogance grew sharper in his mind. He wondered how he hadn't noticed it before. His heart ached with a quiet anger he couldn't express just yet. "Rachael, why don't you join us?" Michael said suddenly, his voice kind but firm. The room fell silent. Bella's smile froze, and Christiana's eyes narrowed. Rachel's face turned red, and she shook her head. "I'm fine here," she whispered. Bella's eyes flared with anger. "She doesn't know how to hold a conversation," she scoffed. Michael's jaw clenched. He saw the way Rachel's eyes dropped to the floor, the way her body seemed to shrink. In that moment, a decision crystallized in his mind. He couldn't stand by and watch this any longer. Change was coming, and he was ready to be its catalyst. Michael's discomfort simmered beneath his polite exterior. He couldn't erase the image of Rachel's hunched shoulders and the quiet sadness in her eyes. After a few more minutes of strained conversation, he decided to act. Turning to Rachael, he said, "Rachael, I think there's a position in my company you'd be perfect for. Would you consider coming to work for me?" His words fell like a thunderclap. Bella's smile vanished, replaced by a flash of rage. Christiana's eyes widened in disbelief. The air grew heavy with unspoken anger. Rachel's gaze shot up, her lips parting in shock. I don't know," she stammered, her voice barely audible. Before Rachael could respond, Bella's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Michael, are you serious? She can't handle that kind of responsibility." Her words dripped with disdain. Michael's expression hardened. "I believe in giving people a chance," he said coolly. "Rachael deserves that opportunity." Christiana clenched her jaw, but she didn't dare speak against Michael. Rachel's heart pounded. The idea of working somewhere outside the confines of this house seemed unreal. She wanted to say yes, but fear held her back. Michael gave her an encouraging smile. "Think about it," he said gently. "You don't deserve to be treated like this." As soon as Michael left, the atmosphere in the house erupted like a storm. Bella rounded on Rachael, her eyes blazing with fury. "How dare you embarrass me like that?" she shouted, her voice trembling with rage. "You're pathetic, and you think you deserve to work with Michael?" Rachael recoiled, her hands trembling. Christiana joined in, her voice cold and sharp. "You should have refused immediately, Rachael. Don't get any ideas above your station." The words cut deep, each syllable like a slap. Rachel's hope flickered, but a small ember of determination remained. Michael's offer had planted a seed, and despite their cruelty, she couldn't ignore the possibility of a new life. Bella's anger didn't subside. The thought of Rachael working alongside Michael, outshining her in any way, made her stomach churn. "You're not taking this job," she hissed, her face inches from Rachel's. But Rachael, for the first time, felt a sliver of defiance rise within her. She didn't respond, afraid her voice would betray her resolve. Instead, She turned and walked away, her heart pounding in her chest. Bella's screams followed her down the hall, but they felt distant now. In the quiet sanctuary of her room, Rachael whispered to herself, "I deserve a chance." The words felt fragile but powerful. For once, she held onto hope. Rachael spent the night tossing and turning. Michael's offer replayed in her mind, a beacon of hope that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Could she really escape this life? Could she finally step out of Bella's shadow and build something of her own? Her fingers curled into the worn fabric of her blanket. She had always been told she was nothing, a burden, a failure. But Michael's belief in her lit a spark she couldn't extinguish. The decision solidified in her mind. She would take the job. The thought filled her with equal parts fear and excitement. It was time to fight for her future. The next morning, Rachael emerged from her room with a quiet determination in her eyes. Bella noticed immediately. "You look different," she sneered. "Don't think you're going anywhere." Rachael didn't respond. Instead, she waited until Bella and Christiana were distracted, then picked up the phone. Her hands shook as she dialed Michael's number. When his warm voice answered, relief flooded her. "Michael, I want to take the job," she said softly. His response was immediate and full of encouragement. "I'm glad to hear that, Rachael. Come to the office tomorrow. We'll get everything set up." As she hung up, Rachael felt a thrill of freedom. This was her first step toward change. Rachel's heart pounded as she stepped into Michael's office building the next morning. The glass doors shimmered in the sunlight, and the bustling energy of the workplace filled her with both excitement and anxiety. She adjusted her modest blouse, hoping she looked professional enough. Michael met her in the lobby, his smile genuine and warm. "You're going to do great," he assured her, his eyes full of belief. His confidence bolstered her, and for a moment, the weight of Bella's insults lifted. Michael introduced her to a few colleagues, their polite smiles welcoming. It felt strange to be treated with respect, but it also felt right. As the day unfolded, Rachael was assigned to work with the marketing team. Her tasks were simple at first, organizing files, taking notes during meetings, but she tackled each one with care and precision. To her surprise, the work felt natural. Her attention to detail didn't go unnoticed. By the end of the day, her supervisor praised her efforts. "You're a quick learner, Rachael. We need more people like you here." Her cheeks flushed with pride. She had spent years being told she was worthless, but here, she felt like she belonged. Walking home that evening, she smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. Bella seethed with jealousy when she heard about Rachel's first day at work. She had expected her stepsister to fail, to come crawling back humiliated. But instead, Rachael returned with a quiet confidence that gnawed at Bella's insecurities. "How was your little job?" Bella sneered, her eyes cold. Rachael met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. "It was good," she said simply, her voice steady. Bella's fists clenched at her sides. The calmness in Rachel's demeanor felt like a slap to the face. This was her world, her domain. How dare Rachael intrude on it? The resentment bubbled, a toxic brew of envy and fear. Christiana noticed the shift in Bella's mood and tried to soothe her. "Don't worry, darling. She'll mess up eventually. She always does." Bella nodded, but her mother's words felt hollow. For the first time, Bella doubted her own superiority. The idea that Michael saw something in Rachael that he didn't see in her made her stomach churn. That evening, Bella paced her room, anger simmering. "I won't let her take this from me," she whispered to herself. Her mind spun with plans to undermine Rachael, to remind Michael who the real star was. Bella's smile twisted into something dark. The game was far from over. Michael noticed the change in Bella over the following days. Her smiles were strained, and her laughter had an edge that felt artificial. Whenever Rachel's name was mentioned, Bella's jaw tightened, and her eyes grew cold. At work, Michael found himself seeking out Rachael more often. Her humility and quiet determination drew him in. She was efficient, respectful, and a quick learner. He admired how she took every task seriously, no matter how small. Unlike Bella, who constantly sought praise and attention, Rachael let her work speak for itself. The contrast between the two women became more glaring with each passing day. One afternoon, Michael caught Bella in the break room, whispering to a few of her colleagues. Their laughter stopped when he entered, and Bella turned with a sugary smile. "Oh, just sharing a funny story," she said lightly, but Michael's gut told him otherwise. Later, he overheard some co-workers mocking Rachael's simple clothing and background. His chest tightened with anger. He knew Bella was behind it. That night, he confronted Bella. "Why are you trying to humiliate Rachael?" he demanded. Bella's eyes flashed. "She doesn't belong here, Michael. You know that." Michael's disappointment was palpable. The woman he once adored was becoming a stranger. Rachael quickly noticed the whispers and snickers behind her back. They stung, but she refused to let them break her. She focused on her work, determined not to give Bella the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. Each day was a test of strength, a challenge to stay focused and ignore the malicious glances. Michael noticed her resilience and admired her even more. He called her into his office one afternoon. "You're doing exceptionally well, Rachael," he said gently. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." His kindness warmed her heart. For the first time, she felt seen and valued. Bella, however, was seething. Her attempts to sabotage Rachael were failing. Every insult, every whispered rumor seemed to slide off her stepsister like water off a stone. It was infuriating. One evening, Bella stormed home and lashed out at Rachael. "You think you're better than me now?" she screamed. "You're still the same pathetic nobody." Rachel's hands trembled, but she met Bella's furious eyes. "I'm not trying to be better than you," she whispered. "I just want a chance to live my own life." The quiet strength in her voice shocked Bella. For the first time, she saw a side of Rachael she couldn't control. The next morning, Rachael woke up before dawn. Despite Bella's outburst the night before, she felt stronger than ever. The pain of her past was still there, but it no longer defined her. As she got ready for work, she caught her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes held a spark she hadn't seen in years. At the office, she poured herself into her tasks. Her diligence caught the attention of the department head, who recommended her for a new project. It was a big opportunity, one that would place her in the spotlight. Fear gnawed at her, but Michael's encouraging smile gave her courage. "You can do this," he said, his eyes filled with belief. When Bella heard the news, her anger boiled over. How did she get that project? She fumed to Christiana. "I've been here longer. This isn't fair." Christiana nodded, feeding her daughter's resentment. "You need to remind Michael who you are," she advised. Bella took the words to heart. That evening, she cornered Michael in his office, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Darling, don't you think I should be handling that project instead of Rachael?" Michael's jaw tightened. "Bella, this isn't about favoritism. It's about skill and dedication." His words were like a slap. For the first time, Bella realized she was losing her grip on him. Rachael threw herself into the new project with everything she had. It was challenging, but she discovered a passion for marketing she hadn't known existed. Late nights spent researching and strategizing paid off. Her ideas were fresh, her execution flawless. Her team members began to respect her, some even looking to her for guidance. The timid girl who once cowered under Bella's insults was fading away. In her place stood a woman who was learning to trust herself. Each day, her confidence grew, and with it, her dreams expanded. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she was free from the shadows of her past. Michael watched her transformation with quiet admiration. He was drawn to her sincerity, her work ethic, and the kindness she showed to everyone around her. One evening, After a particularly successful presentation, he invited her out for coffee. They sat in a quiet cafe, the hum of the city around them. "You've come so far, Rachel," he said softly. "I'm proud of you." Her cheeks flushed, and her eyes sparkled with gratitude. "Thank you for believing in me," she whispered. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world faded away. Something deeper was growing between them, something neither of them could deny. Bella's jealousy spiraled out of control. She saw the way Michael looked at Rachael, the quiet admiration in his eyes. It gnawed at her like a disease. Her attempts to win Michael back grew desperate. She dressed more provocatively, showered him with affection, but nothing worked. His eyes no longer lit up when he saw her. One evening, she planned a romantic dinner at his apartment. Candles flickered, and the scent of expensive perfume filled the air. But Michael's smile was thin, his mind elsewhere. As she leaned in to kiss him, he pulled back. "Bella, we need to talk," he said, his voice strained. Bella's heart pounded. "What is it?" she demanded, fear creeping into her voice. Michael sighed, running a hand through his hair. "This isn't working anymore," he said gently. "We've changed. I've changed." Her eyes widened in horror. "Is this about her?" she spat, venom dripping from her words. Michael's jaw tightened. "This is about us. About who we are together, and who we aren't." Bella's world crumbled. Rage, fear, and humiliation twisted inside her. As he walked her to the door, her mind screamed with denial. This couldn't be happening. She couldn't lose. But deep down, she knew she already had. Bella stormed home, her face contorted with rage. Christiana was waiting in the living room, a glass of wine in her hand. "What happened?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "He broke up with me," Bella shouted, her voice trembling. "Because of her." She collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. Christiana's face twisted in anger. "That ungrateful girl," she hissed. "After everything we've done for her." But Bella wasn't listening. Her thoughts spiraled into darkness. Her pride was shattered, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. The humiliation was unbearable. She had always been the star, the one who was adored. Now she felt like nothing. Rachael was in her room, unaware of the storm brewing outside her door. She was lost in her thoughts, the memory of Michael's warm smile lingering in her mind. For the first time in her life, she felt valued, seen, and respected. But her peace was shattered when Bella burst into her room. "You ruined everything," Bella screamed, her face red with fury. "He left me because of you." Rachel's heart pounded. "I didn't ask for any of this," she whispered. Bella's eyes flashed with hatred. "You'll pay for this," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. In that moment, Rachael realized that Bella's jealousy had turned into something far more dangerous. Rachel's hands shook as Bella stormed out of her room, the door slamming so hard the walls seemed to vibrate. She felt a pit of dread settle deep in her stomach. The hatred in Bella's eyes was different this time. It was raw, unfiltered, and dangerous. Rachael knew things would only get worse. She tried to focus on the positive, reminding herself of the job, her progress, and Michael's kindness. But the air in the house was thick with tension. Every glance from Bella or Christiana felt like a dagger poised to strike. She tiptoed through the halls, careful to avoid confrontation, but deep down, she knew a confrontation was inevitable. At work, Rachael found solace. Her colleagues' smiles were genuine, and her supervisor praised her efforts daily. Michael continued to check in on her, his presence a source of comfort. They shared stolen moments of conversation, laughter, and understanding. Yet, there was a lingering tension, an unspoken truth between them. One afternoon, as Michael walked her to her desk, he paused. "Are you okay at home?" he asked softly, his eyes filled with concern. Rachael hesitated, the words catching in her throat. She wanted to confide in him, to tell him everything. but fear held her back. "I'm managing," she whispered. Michael's jaw tightened, but he didn't push. He knew there was more to her story, and it gnawed at him. Bella paced her room, her mind spiraling with vengeful thoughts. Her humiliation still burned in her veins, and she was determined to make Rachael pay. Her eyes settled on her phone, and an idea formed. If Rachael's success was taken away, maybe Michael would realize who the real star was. Bella spent the night combing through Rachael's work files, looking for any tiny mistake, anything she could use to ruin her stepsister's reputation. When she found nothing, her frustration boiled over. She needed a bigger, bolder plan, one that would destroy Rachael's credibility once and for all. The next morning, Bella arrived at work early, her smile tight and her eyes gleaming with malice. She snuck into the office where Rachael's project files were kept and swapped out key documents with incorrect data. Her fingers trembled with anticipation as she imagined Rachael's humiliation during her presentation. It was perfect. By the time Rachael arrived, Bella was already seated, pretending to work. When Rachael smiled and greeted her, Bella returned a fake smile. "Good luck with your presentation," she said sweetly. Rachael nodded, oblivious to the trap that had been set. Bella's heart raced with excitement. This was her moment to reclaim her throne. Rachael walked into the conference room, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This presentation was a pivotal moment in her career, and she had worked tirelessly to make sure it was perfect. As she began speaking, the room was quiet, eyes glued to her with interest. But halfway through, she noticed confused glances and furrowed brows. A cold sweat broke out on her neck. She flipped to the next slide, and her stomach dropped. The data was wrong. The numbers didn't match her research. Panic surged through her veins. Her voice wavered, and whispers began to ripple through the room. Michael's eyes narrowed as he noticed the inconsistency. He could see the confusion and panic on Rachael's face. His gut told him something was wrong, not with her work, but with the situation itself. When the presentation ended, Rachael's face was pale, her hands trembling. She couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Bella sat in the back, a triumphant smirk on her face. Michael stood up and said calmly, "Thank you, Rachael. We'll sort this out." His tone was measured, but his eyes burned with suspicion. As the room emptied, he approached Rachael. "This isn't like you," he said gently. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I don't know what happened," she whispered. But Michael's mind was already racing. He knew exactly who to suspect. Michael spent the evening going through the files. He compared the presentation data with the original documents Rachael had submitted earlier. The discrepancies were obvious and deliberate. His jaw clenched with anger. There was no doubt someone had tampered with her work. The realization made his stomach churn. He called Rachael into his office the next morning. She entered hesitantly, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "Rachael," he said softly, "I know you didn't make those mistakes. Someone sabotaged you." Her eyes widened in shock, then filled with relief. "Thank you for believing me," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Michael's heart ached at the sight. He knew he needed proof before taking action. With the help of the IT department, they traced the unauthorized access to Rachael's files. The culprit's name flashed on the screen, Bella Williams. Michael's hands curled into fists. Betrayal and disappointment churned inside him. He summoned Bella to his office. When she arrived, her confident facade crumbled under his furious gaze. "Why, Bella?" he asked, his voice cold. "Why would you do this?" She stammered, unable to meet his eyes. "She was stealing everything from me," she muttered. Michael shook his head, the final thread of his patience snapping. "The only person who destroyed your chances was you." He dismissed her, his heart heavy, knowing their relationship was beyond repair. Bella's mind spun as she left Michael's office, her legs shaky beneath her. The weight of her actions was finally pressing down on her, suffocating her with regret and shame. But her pride wouldn't allow her to admit defeat. When she got home that evening, she slammed the door behind her, fury bubbling just below the surface. Christiana, lounging in the living room, took one look at her daughter's face and demanded to know what had happened. Bella's voice trembled with suppressed rage. "He knows, Mom. Michael knows I sabotaged Rachel. Everything is falling apart." Christiana's eyes narrowed. "We can fix this. He's just angry now. He'll come to his senses." But Bella shook her head, despair creeping into her voice. "No, Mom. I've lost him. It's over." The realization made her heart ache. Her desperation turned into anger, and her gaze landed on Rachael, who had just entered the room. Without thinking, Bella screamed, "This is all your fault. You ruined everything." Rachael, tired of the constant accusations and abuse, finally snapped. "No, Bella. You did this to yourself. I never wanted any of this." Her voice was firm, and for the first time, Bella saw the steel in Rachel's eyes. The tables had turned. Rachael spent the night reflecting on the whirlwind of events. For so long, she had allowed herself to be a victim, letting Bella and Christiana's cruelty define her existence. But now, something had changed. Michael's belief in her had ignited a spark of self-worth. She could no longer live in fear, no longer allow their hatred to control her life. The next morning, she packed her belongings. As she descended the stairs, Christiana sneered, "Running away? Just like your mother." Rachael paused, her back straight. "I'm not running. I'm finally living my life on my own terms." Bella stood silently by the doorway, her eyes hollow. She wanted to scream, to fight, but deep down she knew it was over. Rachael walked out of the house for the last time, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. The fresh air filled her lungs as she stepped into the world, free. Michael was waiting for her outside, his eyes filled with pride and affection. "You're brave, Rachael," he said softly. She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "For the first time, I finally feel it." Together, they walked toward a future that, for once, felt full of promise. Michael offered Rachael a place to stay temporarily until she found her footing. His apartment was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold, suffocating house she had left behind. In those quiet moments, Rachael began to heal. She spent her evenings journaling, rediscovering parts of herself that had been buried for so long. Michael gave her space but was always there when she needed a listening ear or a comforting presence. Their bond deepened with each passing day. He admired her resilience, while she found solace in his steady support. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony watching the sunset, Michael turned to her. "Rachael, you don't have to face this alone anymore." His voice was soft, filled with sincerity. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I've spent so long feeling alone. But with you, it's different." She hesitated, then added, "I'm afraid of being hurt again." Michael gently took her hand. "I won't let that happen." In that moment, something shifted between them. The walls around Rachel's heart began to crumble, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe in love. Meanwhile, Bella's life continued to unravel. Her reputation at work was in tatters after the sabotage was exposed. Her colleagues distanced themselves, and even those who once admired her now looked at her with disdain. Michael had reported her actions to the higher-ups, and disciplinary measures followed swiftly. She was suspended without pay, a blow to both her pride and her finances. At home, Christiana's frustration boiled over. "You had everything, Bella. How could you let it slip through your fingers?" Bella's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how it got this bad, Mom. I just wanted to be the best." But deep down, Bella knew the truth. Her own insecurities and jealousy had driven her to ruin. One night, she sat in her room, staring at her reflection. The person staring back at her was a stranger, a hollow, bitter version of herself. She whispered into the darkness, "I need to change." For the first time, Bella felt the weight of her mistakes, not just as failures but as opportunities to grow. The realization was painful, but necessary. If she wanted redemption, she would have to fight for it. Rachel's confidence continued to blossom at work. After the sabotage incident, her colleagues rallied behind her, offering support and encouragement. The department had praised her perseverance and dedication, and she was assigned to lead a new, high-profile project. The recognition filled her with a sense of accomplishment she had never known before. Michael, watching from a distance, felt his heart swell with pride. Her success was well-deserved, and he was grateful to have played a small role in helping her find her path. One afternoon, as Rachael was preparing for a meeting, Bella walked into the office. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and her shoulders slumped with defeat. "Can we talk?" Bella's voice was shaky, almost pleading. Rachael hesitated, old wounds threatening to reopen. But something in Bella's eyes was different, an honesty she hadn't seen before. Taking a deep breath, Rachael nodded. They walked to a quiet corner of the office. Bella's voice broke as she said, "I'm sorry, Rachael. For everything." The apology hung in the air, raw and fragile. Rachel's heart ached, but she knew that forgiveness wasn't for Bella, it was for her own peace. Bella's apology was the first step in a long journey toward redemption. Rachael listened quietly, her heart torn between anger and compassion. Bella confessed her insecurities, her fear of being overshadowed, and how those fears had twisted her into someone she no longer recognized. Rachel's voice was steady. "It's not enough to say you're sorry. You have to show it." Bella nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I know. I want to change." The sincerity in her voice was real, and for the first time, Rachael saw a glimpse of the sister Bella could have been. Rachael didn't offer immediate forgiveness. Instead, she offered a chance for Bella to prove herself. "It's going to take time," Rachael said. "But if you're willing to put in the effort, maybe we can heal." Bella clutched onto that sliver of hope. She knew rebuilding trust wouldn't be easy, but she was willing to try. As they parted ways, Rachael felt a sense of closure she hadn't thought possible. She was no longer a victim of Bella's cruelty. She was free, and the power to decide her future was finally in her hands. Bella's journey toward redemption began with small steps. She started volunteering at a local shelter, hoping to rebuild herself and her sense of purpose. Each day brought new challenges as she confronted the darker aspects of her past. At first, the tasks were mundane: cleaning, organizing supplies, and helping out in the kitchen. But through it all, Bella found herself humbled by the stories of people who had faced far greater hardships. Slowly, she began to understand the importance of empathy and humility, qualities she had long ignored in her quest to be the best. The more she gave of herself, the more she felt a flicker of hope that she could be better. Meanwhile, Rachael focused on her career and newfound independence. With Michael's support, she excelled in her new project, earning the admiration of her peers. The workplace was no longer just a refuge, it was a platform where she could thrive. One afternoon, as she presented a successful marketing campaign, applause filled the conference room. Michael's eyes met hers, and his smile conveyed everything he felt: pride, admiration, and love. After the meeting, he pulled her aside. "You've built something incredible, Rachael," he said. "And I'm honored to be part of your journey." His words warmed her heart, reinforcing the strength she had discovered within herself. One rainy evening, Rachael returned home to find Bella waiting outside her apartment building, drenched and shivering. A pang of sympathy surged through her, despite the history between them. She opened the door and led Bella inside, handing her a towel and a warm cup of tea. They sat in silence for a moment, the air thick with unspoken words. Bella's voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't deserve your kindness, but I needed to see you. I'm trying to change, Rachael. I really am." Her eyes were filled with genuine remorse, and for the first time, Rachael believed her. "I see that," Rachael replied softly, But change isn't just about words, it's about consistency. I need to know you won't go back to the person you were. Bella nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I want to be better, not just for you, but for myself. They sat together in quiet reflection, the walls between them slowly crumbling. For Rachael, it wasn't about forgetting the pain, it was about healing from it. In that quiet room, a fragile truce was formed. Bella didn't ask for immediate forgiveness, and Rachael didn't offer it. But the door was open, and that was enough. As Rachel's life continued to blossom, her relationship with Michael deepened. Their connection had grown from friendship into a love rooted in respect and understanding. One evening, after a long day at work, Michael invited Rachael to dinner. The restaurant was intimate, lit by soft candlelight. As they ate, laughter flowed easily between them. But beneath the light-hearted conversation, something deeper simmered. Michael reached across the table, taking her hand in his. Rachael, you've been through so much, and you've come out stronger. I admire you more than I can say. Her heart swelled with emotion. You've been my anchor through all of this, Michael. I wouldn't be where I am without you. He shook his head gently. You did this on your own. I was just lucky enough to be by your side. He paused, his gaze intense. I want to be by your side for a long time, Rachael. Her breath caught in her throat as he reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. Will you let me? He opened it to reveal a simple, elegant ring. Tears filled her eyes. Yes, Michael. Yes, 1,000 times. Their love, tested by fire, was now a beacon of hope for the future. The sun shone brightly on the day of their wedding. The ceremony was small and intimate, attended by close friends and supportive colleagues. Rachel's heart was a whirlwind of emotions, joy, gratitude, and a profound sense of peace. As she walked down the aisle, her eyes locked on Michael's, who stood waiting for her with a smile that spoke of endless devotion. In that moment, all the pain of the past seemed to fade away, replaced by the promise of a future filled with love and mutual respect. They exchanged vows, each word a testament to the journey they had taken together. Bella sat quietly in the back row, tears streaming down her face. She had been given a chance to attend the wedding, a gesture of goodwill from Rachael. For Bella, it was a bittersweet moment, a reminder of all she had lost, but also of all she could still become. As Rachael and Michael shared their first kiss as husband and wife, Bella felt a flicker of hope. She still had a long way to go, but for the first time, she believed that change was possible. The day ended with laughter and celebration, but for Rachael, it was more than just a wedding, it was the beginning of a life where she was finally free, loved, and whole. That's the end of the story. What did you learn from this amazing story? Please leave a like and subscribe for more interesting stories. Thanks for watching.